Hi, I'm Barb Demorest, and I'm the founder of Knitted Knockers. And I'm here to share my story of nothing wasted, how God can use a nobody to bring passion and purpose not only into her own life, but into the lives of many, many others. It was about 10 years ago when I was feeling quite dry and dead, actually not dead, but dull spiritually. And I asked God if there was still something left for me. This senior period of my life, the season ahead of me, people were asking, when are you going to retire? And I was like, retire? What am I going to do? And so I was asking God to show me my passion and purpose. Surely there would be something there for me in this season of life. And it was a while later when I was diagnosed with breast cancer. And through that process, I ended up having to have a mastectomy. And I thought it would still be okay because I could be reconstructed right away and nobody really needed to know. It didn't turn out so well. I ended up not being able to be reconstructed due to complications. And that's where I entered what I called my dark night of despair. Now that might sound a little dramatic, but I didn't cry during the diagnosis of breast cancer, the treatment, the mastectomy, but there was one night after the mastectomy that I remember vividly waking up and just sobbing. And my poor husband, he just embraced me and said it'd be okay, but it wasn't okay. And it was just a very dark and despairing time for me. And it wasn't just the mastectomy. Many things in my life were in flux at that point. So little did I know, though, that God was preparing to move me into that passion and purpose that I had prayed for a few years before that. And so it was later that week when I went into my doctor's office and I asked him, what can I wear to appear normal to get back to life? And he said, most women are not satisfied with the traditional breast prosthetics. They can be hot and heavy and sticky. And I was like, well, what am I going to do? And he said, do you knit? And I was like, yeah, why? And he said, well, I've never seen one, but I've heard there's such a thing as a knitted knocker. And this was told to me by a patient. He said, you might want to check it out. Well, I wasn't in any shape to knit anything at that point, even though I was a knitter. So I went home and I called my dear friend Phyllis, who's an avid knitter. And I said, Phyllis, have you ever heard of a knitted knocker? And she said, no, but I'll find out. So it was about a week later when I ventured out into public for the first time, and I was very self-conscious. I wore a loose-fitting jacket. I went to church. And when I got there, here comes Phyllis tripping into church with a Victoria's Secret bag. And in this bag, she gave it to my husband and says, give it to Barb and don't look in the bag. Well, when he gave it to me, I knew immediately what it was. So I took it into the bathroom at church and I pulled out the most beautiful knitted knocker. It was soft, it was light, it was beautiful. It could be worn in a regular bra, and best of all, it was made by somebody who cared. So I put that in my bra. I removed my jacket, and I immediately re-engaged with life. It was life-changing to me, this gift, this simple little knit gift of comfort and dignity made by somebody who cared. I went out, I got hugs, I was Barb again. And I knew immediately that this needed to be made available in the doctor's offices. So when other women were going through this process and struggling with what to do, the doctor wouldn't have to say, do you know somebody who knits? Or, you know, here's the traditional breast prosthetics, which many people find uncomfortable. We needed to provide these to people. We needed to be a Phyllis for the doctor's offices. So it was at that moment that I found my passion and purpose. God just downloaded into me this vision of being able to reach out and help others. And when it changed from being all about poor me and, oh, isn't this awful and everything, to, oh, we can help others, it just changed everything. So I went to my doctor and I said, if we provide these to you, would you hand these out to patients? And he said, we would love to do that. So Phyllis and I got busy knitting, and we started knitting those and taking them into the doctor's office, stuffing them and providing them. And it was a huge hit. The doctor loved it, and the rest of his clinic loved it too. And the recipients were just thrilled with them. So I said, well, how many of these are we going to need? And he said, well, in Whatcom County, which is the county that I live in, there's 50 mastectomies done a year, but you're going to need way more than that, because many, many women, when they find out about these that have had mastectomies over the last 10 or 20 years, are going to want these. And then he said there's 50,000 mastectomies done a year in the United States. So, you know, all of those women are going to want them. And guess what? There's 1 million women living in the United States who have had a mastectomy and not been reconstructed. So you're going to need a lot of knitted knockers. So I thought, well, this is too big. This is too much. I can't do anything like that. But God can. And so God downloaded again. I use that term, but it's true. He put in me this idea that we needed to inspire and equip people to provide for their own communities. We can't do it all. We can provide for our doctor's office. What if this could be replicated all across the country? And guess what? It worked. I mean, it was incredible. I was still working at this time. I was working away for a paycheck, but my heart was on this, in inspiring and equipping others to provide for their communities. And so we created this website, and God kept showing up. My goodness, I thought, there's no way that we can meet this need if the word gets out there. So we need to connect with knitters and crocheters, right? We need to find people so that we can inspire them to make them so they're available. It does no good to create this huge demand for something we can't meet. So how do I connect with knitters and crocheters? All I know is how to knit. And God found a way. I mean, he provided the way, but he provided a connection with one of the most powerful people in the crafting industry. He puts on the largest participatory conventions for crafters in the country and maybe the world. And through this connection, he decided to feature knitted knockers as their featured charity at their largest event, where there's 11,000 knitters and crocheters that come together for the weekend and participate in classes and all kinds of things. I spoke at the event, we had booths, we participated in a call to action to knit them. He gave us free ads in the books. I mean, everything. It was just absolutely stunning. It was way beyond what I could have done, but God did it. And through that, all of a sudden, the word got out among the knitters and crocheters nationwide. It gave us credibility. It gave us, we were a real charity. And so people started to embrace the project. When that event was done, Benjamin, the CEO of Stitches, which is what that event was, called me and he said, Barbara, he says, I want to thank you for doing this event. He said, my wife gave me a hug after this event and said she was proud of me. And she said to me, you're not done with them yet, are you? Because they are doing God's work. And he says, so we're not done with you, are we? And I said, no, I would love to participate in more events. But those were connections that were just priceless, that I could not do on my own. I'm an accountant. I'm a retired CPA. What do I know? I'm now retired. I wasn't then. But what do I know about the knitting industry and these connections? And he said, I'm not going to be done with you until I have connected you with every major yarn company in the world, where you can call them and they will take your call. And he says, then we'll consider it done. Whoa, that is such a God thing. Okay, so God has this plan, and we've got our knitters now, and now we need to get the word out to people. We have inspired and equipped people. We posted to make these knitted knockers. We posted our patterns online, which now have been downloaded 1.2 million times. We posted video tutorials on how to make great knit and crochet knockers. They've been viewed over 500,000 times. And we made it all free because we wanted to give these gifts of love and caring freely to people. So here we've got the knitters and crocheters, and women could go online and order their knitted knockers from knittedknockers.org. They can order their size and color, and we were filling those. And we had a nice network of people locally, about 20 people that meet every week and get together and stuff knockers and send them out and such. We'd been going along pretty good, and we had a network out there around the country of groups that had caught the vision and started making knitted knockers for their community. But my vision was still to connect with these medical offices, to not just be mailing knockers out to people. How can we connect with these medical people? I don't have those connections, right? So I had to go back to my doctor all the time because of treatment. So I'm in there, and I mentioned to my doctor about this, and he says, when you're able to handle the volume, I'd like to take you back to the National Accreditation of Breast Clinics Conference. And he said, I'm the past president of that. Whoa, is that a connection? I mean, they are the accreditation for every breast clinic across the country in the United States. And he says, but you need to be ready for that volume because everyone there is going to want this. So we better give it some time. Okay, all right. So we just kept working on our network. Well, one time, this started in 2011. About in 2016, I get this call from Dear Abby, the newspaper columnist, advice columnist, and says, we'd like to run this letter about knitted knockers. Somebody said we'd be doing women a great service if we shared about this great product, right? And we wanted to make sure that you can handle the volume if we do that. And so I'm like, well, how many do you expect? And she said, we have 100 million readers. But I thought, okay, at that time in 2016, we were giving away free 1,000 knitted knockers a month. We had this lovely network of providers that were filling orders that came in from their state. And I thought, yeah, no problem. Go ahead and run that letter. Our internet crashed because of all the inquiries that came in. And were overwhelmed with requests. We got 10,000 requests in 3 days. And now here, we're like giving away 1,000 a month system-wide. We were overwhelmed. And literally overwhelmed. And I thought, okay, how are we going to do this? In fact, one of my our volunteers said, Barb, we can't do this. It's impossible. We're just a bunch of old ladies. How can we do this? And I agreed. I was like, it's impossible. I went home and I cried out to God, God, we're just a bunch of old ladies. How can we do this? I whined to my son, adult son, and he said to me, he says, Mom, remember, God uses the nobodies. He uses the people in their weakness. That's when he shows up. And he reminded me of the story of Gideon in the Bible, where God told Gideon, you go up and you fight those Midianites, a very powerful group of people. And Gideon goes, I can't do that, God. Why would you choose me? I'm the weakest of the weakest tribes. How can I do that? And I only have 30,000 men, and there's just like this ton. It's impossible. And God said to him, go in the strength you have. Have I not called you? And I thought, I mean, that's my son reminding me of this. I go, he's right. And I started thinking about the strengths that we have. Well, and is God leading this? Yes, God is leading this. We filled all 10,000 of those orders. It took us 3 months, but we did it. But you know what? God was in it, and God had a reason for this. He didn't just throw us out there and say, you just do what you can. No, he knew we needed to get prepared for bigger things. We needed to go in the strength we had, but we also needed to review our processes and come up with better processes, because God had a bigger plan for us than our vision was. And so that just took us to the next level. And so I had mentioned earlier that my passion was about connecting with doctors' offices so that they could provide these knitted knockers to their patients. And at that point of vulnerability. And so I was like, okay, how are we going to do this? Well, my doctor had this in to go to this medical conference, right? Well, were we ready? Well, I think we were. So we had this networks in place. We now had better processes. We had thousands of volunteer knitters and crocheters working. Wait, by the way, I just want to say we have no paid staff. We're all volunteers and giving these free knockers away. It's just miraculous, honestly. But how do we connect with these doctors so that they can catch the vision? And so we went back to that conference that Dr. Kaufman was the past president of. It was a huge hit. These conferences, these conventions, the American Society of Breast Surgeons, we went to the Oncology Nurses Conference, we went to this particular conference about the accreditation ones. People pay tons of money to have booths in there, vendors and such. We were a huge hit. The doctors could not believe it, that there was such a simple solution that they could give free to their patients. And they knew the challenges that their patients were experiencing with the traditional breast prosthetics. Our booths were overrun. We would have 3 or 4 volunteers with us at these booths over these weekends, and we're no spring chickens. We would be exhausted at the end of each day from talking. We would be hoarse in sharing the stories, but we were just, our cups were overflowing, literally, with joy at being able to reach the medical profession. Out of those 3 conferences that we went to, we signed up 800 clinics, which now has grown to 1,634 clinics around the country that are providing knitted knockers. And guess what? That vision of people being inspired and equipped to provide for their own communities came through that. We have in place a process where people can adopt those and knit directly for them and crochet for them and take them in. The beautiful thing is the volunteers are making these for people in their own community. The women are receiving them from people in their own community. We provide the print materials, the brochures and the care instructions, things like that. But It's all about inspiring and equipping for their own communities. That vision that God had given me years before was coming to fruition. So things are going along pretty well again. But my husband says, Barb, you're working so much. When are you going to cut back? I had retired in the interim because I couldn't. I was working 60 hours a week just on knitted knockers, and I work harder for knitted knockers than I ever did for a paycheck. But boy, it's worth it. But anyway, my husband was like, okay, Barb, when are you going to cut back? I mean, we're retirement years now. And I was like, okay, God, how do I cut back? You know, because who's going to do this? The stuff that I'm doing. We have thousands of volunteers making them. We have a wonderful team, but I don't know how to cut back. So I was praying, God, raise up a volunteer that can handle the emails. And lo and behold, I get this email from this lovely woman in a different state, and she says, I'm so inspired by what you do. How can I help? And I said, well, what I really need is somebody that can do emails and stuff. Well, that's what I do for work. She says, when I retire in a year, I'll do that. And I thought, oh, thank you very much. Yeah, we'll see what happens in a year, you know. Well, she did. After that year, she emailed me. She says, I'm ready. And she has taken on so much of my emails. She took that off my plate. But in the interim, I got this phone call from the BCIEA, Philippa, the Breast Cancer Initiative of East Africa. And Philippa, she says, I'm from Rwanda. And she said, I ordered some knitted knockers from you, and you sent them to me. And I just think they're wonderful, and I think they would be great for the women of Rwanda. What do you think? And I've always thought that these would be fantastic for third world countries, hotter climates, that you can wash them, you can swim in them and such. And I said, yeah, I think that'd be great. And she says, well, our women don't like the traditional breast prosthetics that are donated from the United States because they're not of our skin color and the rats eat the silicone. Anyway, she says, I think these would work great, but our women know how to knit, but they don't know how to read the patterns. Can you come teach us? And I go, oh, no, that's not in our scope, and it's definitely not cutting back. And she said, oh, but there's so much stigma, and we're working so hard to get the word out. And women, mastectomy is their only treatment here, and many women choose to die rather than get a mastectomy because they have no good alternative. And she said, you really need to come. So I said, well, I'm going to talk to my husband because this is definitely not cutting back. So I get off the phone and I tell my husband the story, and he says, Barb, you have to go. And I'm like, well, that's not cutting back. You have to go. Well, we can't use our donated money for this because this is a different country and everything. He says, that's okay. I'll work another year before I retire. And I go, okay, that's confirmation. My husband, you know, it's priceless when God provides those counselors and those advisors and those authority around you that you can consult with that will confirm these things. So we did go to Rwanda, and 3 of us went. Oh my gosh, we got invited to speak, to meet with the head of the largest hospital in Rwanda, in Kigali. And when we came in there, we sat down and handed the doctor, the head doctor of the hospital there, a dark brown knitted knocker. And he picked it up in his hands and he started to cry. And we were like, why is he crying? And he said, I had a woman in here yesterday who I said had to have a mastectomy, and she said no. And I said to her, it's your breast or your life. I had nothing to offer her. We need these. So Philippa from the BCIEA was with me, and she says, we can provide those to you. because the 30 women that we had trained while we were there about 2 weeks staying in people's homes. We had trained 30 women. And she said, we can provide them to you. You pay us the cost of the yarns and $1 a day, the equivalent for knitted knockers. That will keep the women out of the fields. They can stay home with their babies. They can knit these and provide them to you, and then you give them free to the patients. And he said, we will do this. And we need to do this in every hospital in the country, all 5 government hospitals. And then, I mean, as if God didn't do enough there, we got invited to the Minister of Health. And the Minister of Health, she was just amazed at these knitted knockers. And Philippa was with me again from the BCIEA. And she said, I need somebody on my advisory board to help me understand breast cancer. And we need to educate our women more. And we need to reach out for them. Would you be on my board? She said, how can I help you, the BCIEA? And Philippa says, well, I'll be on your board. And I'm like, that's a pretty big ask to ask the Minister of Health. And she said, perfect. There's a chair for you. You are on my health board. And then she says, what else can I do for you? And she said, well, you can give us a second mammogram machine in the country. And she says, well, you've already got 2. No, we don't. We've only got 1. No, you've got 2. No, you only have 1. And the Minister of Health says, well, we need 2. How much would it cost? She says, $1 million, Philippa did. She goes, no way. And she said, well, we need to have the van to take them out to the mammogram machine out to the villages. We need to have the nurse to go with it. We need $1 million. She says, okay. So because of the novelty of these old white women with this funny little knitted knockers, the country of Rwanda was impacted significantly. We were in the public news, the major newspaper, we were on the TV. It was just wild what God did by us just saying, yeah, we'll go and we'll teach some women how to make these. And since then, other countries have sent people there to learn from them how to make knitted knockers. So, you know, it's been a wild ride, but it hasn't all been easy. There's times when it's exhausting. There's times when there's criticism. There's times when you have too little money or too few knockers or not enough time. You have all these struggles and you go, I can't do this. This is too big for me. But God always shows up. And he only asks us to go in the strength that we have, that he is the one leading us. And so I have learned when I get criticism, it hurts, but I've learned that God is not asking me to do anything but to love him and to love others. That's all he's asking. And I have learned that if I don't respond with that anger or what I feel is justified response to defend myself, but I step back and I breathe and maybe send a responding email the next day or a Facebook post or whatever, and always try to lead with love. It may not have fixed their problem, their issue with me, but it sure did help my attitude. So I've learned that's what God is asking of us, is to love him and to love others. And, you know, there's that side of the coin, the criticism, but there's also the praise. Oh my gosh, aren't you fantastic? Look at what you've done. I did an interview with Good Housekeeping, and I remember them saying, isn't this amazing what you have done? You are in 33 countries and you're reaching all these women and blah, 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 blah. And I immediately thought, it is not me. It is God that is doing this. So there's the temptation to have, you've got to learn humility through this. So dealing with criticism, dealing with praise, both sides of the coin, with too little money, too much money happens. All of these details can be very stressful, but I've learned that I need to rest in Him and trust that, my job is to love God and love others. It's His job to make these things happen and to work out the details. And I've learned that it's very important too, to forgive myself for my inadequacies. When I'm not good enough, when I screw up, when I have an oopsie, or I go through a door that I shouldn't have gone through, I need to forgive myself, and I need to forgive others too for their inadequacies. God revealed to me His infinite love through knitted knockers. And one of the ways that He did that was that early on I thought, this is a great product that people are really going to like, but it turned out to be so much more. It was God's gift of love, showing that He cared about even the smallest details. The details where, just losing a breast and a little breast prosthetics. I mean, my goodness, He loved me enough to provide this for me. Also, along the way, we discovered when a woman goes in and she orders her free knitted knockers, she tells us her story. Many times she tells us of her struggles and her challenges because she knows we understand. And you can't always share that with other people. So that gives us an opportunity to share love with those. But in addition, the people that are making these knitted knockers, they discover passion and purpose with their crafts, and it gives them the opportunity to share love and caring with others. And we get testimonies all the time from people about how they can hardly believe that a complete stranger cared enough about them to provide these free knitted knockers for them. I've been asked, can we manufacture these? Because if you need 1 million of them, can't we manufacture them and sell them cheap? Well, yeah, we could. But no, we're not going to, because the love that comes through and the caring is priceless for this, and it's very important. So I want to finish with this. God can use us in any season of our life, even that senior season. He's just waiting for us to ask Him He has a plan and a purpose for us. He just wants us to ask. But boy, when we ask, we better be ready. If God can bring passion and purpose to a senior citizen woman, I'm going to be 70 this year, a nobody, put her in front of world leaders, be in People Magazine, Today Show, NFL Charity of the Month, send her to Africa to teach women, to help others, head a multinational corporation, thousands of medical clinics, have helped over 250,000 women with a skill set that I never knew existed. Actually, it doesn't. It's God. I mean, as Gideon illustrated, it's not our own abilities, it's the ability to allow God to work through us. If He can do that, if He can bring passion and purpose to a 95-year-old woman in a nursing home who emailed us and said, I'm in a nursing home and I'm half blind, but with a magnifying glass, I can make knitted knockers, and I now have a purpose to keep on living because I can help somebody else. If God can do that, use that 95-year-old woman and bring passion and purpose to her, if He can bring passion and purpose and sustenance to Rwanda, women knitting at home with their babies, grieving widows recovering from their grief by reaching out to others. He can do it in your life. We have not because we ask not, the Bible says sometimes. So ask. He will use what you have. He will use what you have. And that same son that asked me before, or reminded me of Gideon, He asked me a few years ago, he says, Mom, if you could go back and not have had breast cancer, knowing what you know now, would you? And my answer was honestly, no, I would not change a thing, because I have a passion and purpose in my life that is beyond my wildest imagination. So finally, God uses the nobodies, and He has a purpose and a plan for all of us. I'm living proof of that. Just ask. Thank you.